Good afternoon and welcome to this IRF session, Retail Insights that every CEO wants to know. Now, if there was a straightforward formula for retail and marketing success, I think all of us could just sit back and enjoy the rest of our lives. But, you know, this panel is about as close as you can get to a formula because each one of them has ground experience, they've been there, they've done that, and the focus over the next hour and 15 minutes is going to be on their specific insights under the broad umbrella of retail and marketing. To set the tone, we have Harish Bajur, who is going to be making a presentation. Harish, may I ask you to take the stage?
Thank you. Pleasure being here this afternoon. I'm going to do a quick 12-minute presentation. And I'm going to be talking to you about targeting customers, oblique consumers in the future. What are the must-have retail insights that a CEO needs to bring to the party? I keep saying that PowerPoint corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. And to that extent, I'm a very corrupted person, so bear with this 12-minute presentation. Let me start. Not too much time, but I have about 6 thoughts to share with you. Let me start by really talking to you about a biting bite, what I call a biting bite. And this is the big one, which is all of us are fully aware that, you know, there's a shift of power today, which we're witnessing in a big, big way. What's really happening is the brand owner is losing power to the retailer. So to that extent, brand Coca-Cola is losing power to the retailer. And the retailer could be a small town retailer, and it could be a big time retailer. So it's quite likely that brand Coca-Cola is losing power to Big Bazaar or to Shetty General Stores in Hole Narsipura in Karnataka. So if you look at it, the sensitive touch point of the future is retail. And I think all the action that's going to happen is happening at this front point. And the retailer needs to get touchy-feely more than he is today. Every retailer, whether you're a small retailer, big retailer, you need to be getting touchy-feely. And insight is it. And the insight that actually drives businesses of the future will come from the front end and not from the back end. So there are 2 insight movements in the world. One is what I call top-down insight movement, which is to say a company has proprietary insight because of which it pushes down a particular message. And the other is a bottom-up insight mechanism where the company harvests bottom-end data and insight and creates an entire organization built around that bottom-end insight. So if you look at it, we're talking about consumer insight. And that's the first biting bite, shift of power. Some quick gyan then. I'm going to talk about 6 issues. One is rediscovering 1:1. One of the biggest issues the CEO of the future and the CEO of the present needs to do is rediscover the joy of 1:1. We have forgotten the joy of 1:1. You know, retail has always been and will always be a relationship process. If you look at the relationship process, but with time, we have lost this relationship process. We have morphed. And what's really happened is, in the old days, we used to be 1:1. And now we are 1:all. In the old days, you know, the best form of retail is one person coming to another person and selling to that one other person. But I think that really was 1:1. We have morphed, and then we went on to 1:many. You see, when I'm out here and I'm talking to you, it's 1:many. This is less efficient than me coming to you personally, sitting with you for 12 minutes and talking to you what I want to talk to you. And then we went to 1:very many. When I cannot speak to you here, I go behind a television camera and I speak to you on television. When you're cooking your chapati or you're rushing to the loo, I don't know how you're reacting to what I'm saying. And finally, it's 1:all. All of us are familiar that by 2017, there's a project which is going to say that we are going to be advertising on the moon, which means that it could be Coca-Cola, it could be Marlboro, it could be any of the brands. You look up at the moon one fine day and it's branded in 2017, which means that when you and your darling of either sex are holding hands and taking a moonlight stroll, and you look up at the moon and it says the moon brought to you by Coca-Cola. I think, you know, that's called 1:all. So if you look at it, that's the ridicule that I'm taking the entire thought pattern of 1:1 to 1:all. The very power of retail remains no longer a power. And this is my first contentious point. The very power of retail was 1:1. We are losing it. We are aggregating instead of disaggregating. and time to read the writing on the wall. And if you really look at it, I think it's important to reinvent the power of 1:1. Point number 2, small is beautiful. I think small is really beautiful. Never manage your retail brand offering as one. Instead, manage it as what it is. This is my second big thought. You know, all of us tend to say, I have a big retail brand and my brand is whatever. Let it be Aditya Birla Retail. I don't think Aditya Birla Retail is one. Aditya Birla Retail has more, and more has n numbers of counters. Every outlet of more is located in a small little area, and I think more is not one, but more is an 1 plus 1 plus 1. Every single more outlet simply means that it's many. What do I mean by this? If you look at it, most of us are enjoying the power of the brand, and we are saying that, you know, the brand brings people in. I think it's time to forget the brand. It's time to look at hinterland management. I think you should manage every small retail outlet as a retail outlet, which means that manage your retail brand as a shop. Every retail outlet differently, with every different hinterland manager looking after every single retail outlet. That's the thought. Hinterland management versus macro brand management is what I'm talking about. Every retail outlet has in a supermarket chain, your hinterland is 1.6 kilometers. In a cafe chain, your hinterland is 0.4 kilometers. So all you need is a set of hinterland managers who look after the brand in that local area and who behave like shopkeepers. So learn from good old retail and look at not one, but many as your brand. Point number 3. The third thing I'm very excited about for the CEO of the future is the world of big data. What is big data? Big data is really big. None of us do enough with the data that we have. The best of companies are not harvesting the kind of data. Okay, we are harvesting it, but maybe we are not using it. So it's like this. Big data is a very big subject of the future. What is the meaning of it? It means to say that a telecom company, let's go to telecom. There are 6 telecom companies in India, let's say the major ones. Everyone collects data for themselves, and that becomes proprietary data, which gives you strength. So what we do is we tend to say that let's collate the 6 pieces of data from the 6 telecom giants, and we have generic data for the telecom market. That's one bucket. Go to the hospitality market, get the 13 hotel chains to give the data in a generic format. Marry the hospitality data to the telecom data. Not only this, marry it to all the 46 verticals that are there in India, and guess what? The top pile, what you have is generic data, which is rich and can be useful for every single marketer in this country. The future is going to be, you know, captured by people who capture this data and use this data. And big data is today a 3 terabit market. And, you know, if you look at a terabit, the classical explanation I read the other day was 1 terabit is like 64 billion iPhones put together in one room. Okay? And that's a lot. So if you look at, you know, 1 billion iPhones, that's 64 KB into 1 billion. That's the size of the data. The big data market in India is about 3 terabytes at this moment, and it's slated to expand to about 8 terabit in the next 2 years. So invest in big data is something that I keep telling CEOs. Okay, I'm going to go quicker now. Time to invest in big data. The need to correlate, the need to weave is very, very important there. I've just got another minute to go, and let's go to the next one, which is brand loyalty is dead. Don't believe in brand loyalty if you're in retail. The new reality is service loyalty. Anybody goes to buy something, basis the service loyalty that he is exuding to the retail outlet that we are talking about. So retail is not a brand. Retail is a service. Underline service. Every product must become a service. The idli that I eat at home in the mornings is a product. But the idli that I eat at a stand-up Darshini joint where I pay 14 rupees for the idli is a service. And if I eat idli at a Leela Palace Hotel in Bangalore or at a Radisson in Mumbai, I pay 260 rupees for that idli. Now that is a service. Retail is essentially a service. Retail is not a product. Those of you who look at retail as a product, we must morph, and the future is about services branding rather than product branding. And I think the problem is this, that most people are besotted and are experts at product branding, but are not experts at services branding. And the fifth one, the e-commerce wave cannot be brushed aside. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I don't have the time now. It's just half a minute left. So essentially, those who are interested can look up a paper I've written on this on my Twitter link. But essentially, I want to say there are 146 million users today. We are going to move to 320 million users in no time. Every single physical retail avatar outlet must have a virtual avatar. And this virtual avatar is something that you cannot avoid. The last thing, invest in relationships, build relationships one-to-one, learn from small retail. If I ask you the question, each one of you has had a flaming relationship with your kaka shop or the small petty shop owner. How many of you have called your petty shop owner uncle in the past? Please put up your hands. Uncle. Look at that. Is he your uncle? But that's relationship. How many have called him Cheta, Shetre, Bhai? How many have called him Bhai? Nobody? Yeah, women mostly, but he never looked at you as a Bhai. Take it from me. Okay? But if you really look at it, learn from small retail. In big retail, it doesn't matter. You called him Rajesh Bhai, you called him Cheta, you called him uncle. In big retail, it doesn't matter. You walk into a big store, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, woman, child, dog, cat, just as long as you have a wallet around with you. I think we have to correct this. Relationship, marketing and branding needs to come back. Once again, the consumer is buying service. Please remember, underline service and not a product anymore. If you don't invest in it, the family doctor will come back. Look at the medical fraternity. In the old days, there was a family doctor. The family doctor gave way to the big hospital. And guess what? The latest movement is the big hospital is giving way to the family doctor. So I think if you want to avoid that happening, then you need to look at carefully managing all this. Thank you. Let's discuss. Pleasure.
I'm going to say wow first, because the joy of 1:1, small is beautiful, the world of big data and brand loyalty is dead. I think you might have a bunch of uneasy CEOs sitting in the audience at the end of this. How we're going to approach this discussion over the next 45 minutes is I'm going to give each of you a chance to pick on one key area, because these are insights, these are their insights, and they want to share them with you. Listen carefully, and then we'll get into a discussion, perhaps a heated one.
Hi, I'm Prakash Nedungadi, and I represent the Aditya Birla Group. Great to be here this afternoon. I think my take on what retail insights every CEO wants to know. When I thought about that, and I think a lot of my thoughts link to what Harish said, there are many things a CEO wants to know, and I've been there and I know what I wanted to know. I wanted to know how I could acquire more customers, how I could get my customers to buy more, how I could get them to come more frequently, and how I could increase my share of wallet with them. And all those kind of questions is what I would say on the first hand is what a CEO says, this is what I want to know, and what insights can help me with that. I want to say, having been there and having done that a lot, I think I would go with what Harish says. I don't think those are what a CEO really, maybe that's what he wants to know, but that's not what he needs to know. What he needs to know really is who is my customer? And most of the time we don't know that. We look at it in terms of symbols, or we look at him as a heavy user, light user, prepaid user, postpaid user, credit user, cash user, whatever. There are many, many ways of looking at it, but we don't really understand who that person is. And it is how we get into that heart and mind of the customer is what really is the starting point of it all. So what I think the first thing that a CEO needs to know is, who are my customers? Now, if you take the case of, for example, of McDonald's, which has talked about how a ubiquitous brand like that can actually do market segmentation in a way that they have identified 3 or 4 key segments which they would focus on and look at and really understand the consumers who come from there. At the Aditya Birla Group, when we look at our More brand, we try and understand who our customers really are. Who are these people? And as Hari said, it's good. You have to have that small retailer kind of mentality to really be able to understand that. And once you understand that, then you can figure out what to do to build their clients and how you get there. There's one additional point to what Hari said. When you are a large retailer and you want to act small, you can't do it yourself. You do it with people. And therefore, what you really need to know is who are your people. I have worked with several retailers who want to know their customers, but they don't really want to know their people. And when I say who they are, I mean, what are they all about? Where are they coming from? What do they think? And how can we help our people who are on the front line help our customers and take care of them even more? Two things to that. One is data sharing. So they need to know all the data that the CEO knows and more. And very often they don't. The data never gets to them in the way they can use it. And secondly, they need to know how they can actually, they need to have the freedom to be able to take decisions on the spot, on spontaneous, to help that customer get what they want. And very often we don't give, we in fact give our people all the rules and all the regulations and all the boundaries, and we very often don't give them the freedom to be able to do what they have to do to act like a small retailer. I think if we can do that, then I think the CEO needs to know a lot less in terms of data, all the data that you require, and he can rest on really thinking about how to build his customer base or how to know his customers even more.
Prakash, thank you very much. Now, there's a logic to which, in which I'm going to be asking each of you to proceed. We've got the big picture from Prakash. Now, Rishi, you're actually focusing on the other side of it, which is there's a lot of data out there, and Harish referred to big data. But then big data, a lot of data, all of it can be overwhelming. And for a CEO, what is good and what is unnecessary?
Hi, I'm Rishi. I represent Arvind Brands. I'm going to talk about what do you do with so much of data that's there for you. For example, we do our own retail in Arrow, Gant, US Polo, iZod, etc. Now, every day, a lot of data is thrown up. So you look at data this way, you see how many bills are being cut, what is the basket size, what is the demographics of the customers coming to you, what is the loyalty factor, what is the frequency of his buy, what products he buys from you, what does he pair with what, on what occasion. So there's loads out there. It's very easy for a CEO to get stuck in some of these data, and then you keep looking at information this side, that side, and you end up looking at it, but you don't see much, right? So what I would like to share is that how do you really move forward? How do you use insights that come from all this information that's out there? And I am a deep believer in, people having hypotheses about the future. And these hypotheses are not necessarily built from the pattern in which your current customers throws the data. It could be built around how the world is moving. For example, and I would give you a specific example here. I was handling a brand called Arrow, which was a brand which stood for shirts, workwear shirts, and very strong at that. But the market was moving, and the youngster was not really buying a shirt. He was buying a solution for, say, workwear or for a professional meeting. And therefore, how do you transit or how do you do the transition? We looked at various categories. So we looked at, for example, Coke. And we said, what's the difference between Coke and Diet Coke? It's not about being no sugar. It's the statement that I am a user of Diet Coke. That's my statement. Why are phones moving from phones to smartphones? It's not that each one of us moved because we wanted to check our mail. It's just a statement we are making about ourselves. And we looked at it and he said, but how are people buying clothes, especially formals? They go and look for, give me my pink, give me my blue. That's how people used to buy. But not the young professional. He comes in and says, he doesn't say, give me a phone which has the maximum memory or which has the maximum data capacity. He comes in and wants a solution. And the one which gives the solution, which is best packaged, he really picks it up without asking too many questions. So therefore, how to give him a dressing solution which would actually address his need rather than telling him, mera wala blue and mera wala pink and mera wala price point. That's not the questions the young guy is asking. Having this hypothesis of offering in a new way, we then went back and started looking at data. And what we picked out, that slim fits were really coming in. People were wanting to pair shirts and trousers and socks and ties, which matched the whole combination. They wanted solutions which brands were not giving them. And looking at this and looking at the categories, we started a project where we said, okay, let's do a small line which addresses a solution, workwear, which is offered as an ensemble rather than as a category. And based on those results of that data, and that came up, we then launched a collection called New York, which we launched last year, doing very well, a small space given to the stores, but accounting for almost 18 to 20% of store sales, which just goes to show that the way you use information could be very different for different people, but you should know how to see it rather than look at it.
Okay, so that's a live example of data analysis which translated into a strategic foray in a sense. We've talked about data, I think, and we've also talked about what every CEO wants to know versus what he needs to know. There's the point that Harish had made in his presentation, Sumanta, which is about, the product is dead. It's all about service now. And throw in some thoughts on that.
I'm Shumanto Datta. I represent the company which Hari says will be on the moon soon, advertising. It's Coca-Cola. Yeah, I wish, right? Harish talked about service. Absolutely spot on. Whether it's a consumer buying a shirt or a Coca-Cola, a chilled bottle of Coca-Cola, it's finally the experience that matters. We cannot keep our promise of giving that experience that the consumer is looking for without partnering with retailers. Small, big, medium, large, in metros, in small towns, everywhere we have to partner with 2 million retailers to ensure that we are delivering on the promise of a chilled bottle. Because without that, I'm going to lose that consumer. So from a CEO's point of view, how is it that our system, the company and the people are delivering on that promise to the end consumer? To do that, you have to partner with retail. So no major big insights there. But without this, you cannot fulfill and fulfill a consumer promise or have a long-term play. Having said that, I think it's also important to see as India emerges to look ahead. Are we anticipating your consumers' needs well ahead of them? Apple is a prime example. They created products which we didn't know we needed. The mobile phone industry didn't exist 2 decades ago. So these are needs that have emerged, and the companies that have been able to really tap into needs that we will have in the future, given demographic, geographic, economic trends, have really cashed in. So from a CEO's point of view, are we investing enough, not just in consumer insights, but I would say customer insights, supply chain insights, route to market insights, and really developing products which will stand the test of time in 2020, in 2030, and beyond.
We can expand on the whole experience aspect with you. Yes, as far as F&B goes, but why don't you share your experiences with us, Mr. Ravi Shankar?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shiv Shankar, representing Lavazza. Lavazza, as you know, is present in this country through Barista, the coffee shop chain. And clearly a lot that Harish talked about is very relevant to us. Very specifically, we focus a lot of time and effort on product because, food and beverage is the core, product differentiation, understanding the consumer, product innovation. A lot of that has to go, a lot of thought has to go in, a lot of research has to go in. A lot of our time, our menu, we do about 2 menus a year. Most of the menus are backed up by very strong research. And just to give you one example, the way we try and weave it with the other parts of our overall positioning is that, with the way competition is coming in, you have all chains from all over the world, you're going to have an American chain coming in. We have decided to stay, and that's obviously our core is Italianity. We stay with Italian. Lavazza has a very strong heritage of over 100 years. So how do we leverage this Italianity into our core offerings? So our themes, our menus are woven around Italy. The next one that we have is focusing on fashion. And we weave fashion into the menu. We weave Italian products into our thing. For instance, through a product breakthrough, we now serve pasta in about 150 stores. So try and bring out the Italianity. And that's one way that we have tried to keep ahead of competition, because we are smaller than perhaps the largest player, but in terms of our food and beverage offering, as of today, we are rated very high. So that becomes a very clear thing. The other way is, because a cappuccino is a cappuccino. You have a cappuccino in one cafe, go to the other one, it's the same.
Oh, loyalists would disagree.
That's what I come to. That's exactly what I come to.
Violently.
Which is what I come to, which is that we try and give a better cappuccino, or a cappuccino which people remember by. And, we top it with flavors, etc. So constant innovation in product, constant innovation in, but in keeping with the core theme of your promise. That's the insight that we would like to
I'm just
understand.
curious. I'm going to ask a question here. As you talked about pasta, you talked about the incorporation of fashion. I'm not sure I understand that completely, but my question is this. Was there a risk you took when you did this? Has it paid off? Was there some hesitance? And, be as honest as you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You see, we are not American. We're not American. We're an Italian company. So, so we logically have to start from that premise. And yes, it has worked very well. It has certainly worked very well, because same-store sale, which is what is the measure that we have, same-store sale has been growing. And that's a clear reflection that the strategy is working.
Very different product, Mr. Patari. But at the end of it, it all boils down to engaging with the customer. And we're all referring to Harish's presentation, because I think it really summarized everything beautifully in 11 or 12 minutes. The one-to-one experience, focus on the customer, specific insights, what you do at Maxwell with VIP.
Represents Maxwell brands like VIP, Frenchy, Feelings, Brat, and Eminence. And newly born in our company is Inners Retail Stores, which has been launched. We cut across more than 50,000 outlets in the country through various trade channels and the retail channels of our own call Inners now. I think CEO needs to know a lot of things which has been already spoken, but some important things which I feel is he needs to understand how to connect with the customers. Because customers at various parts of the country, they are behaving differently. And it's very important to understand who I am for. And I think that's the important thing every CEO needs to know, whom I am for. Like our products, like when I say inners, even in undergarments, it's very important for us that who I am for. Because our experience is that for the last 40 years we have been seeing consumers in the north, they behave in a very different manner. Consumers in the south, they behave in a different manner. It's a small product, but yes, in this category also, in terms of colors, in terms of pattern, in terms of sizing, there is a different behavior pattern of the consumers. Yes, in different product categories it would be different, but even in our category, it has been a different. Not only in India, but across the country when we cross the borders, like our brand represents into 16 more countries across the borders. And even the consumer patterns are different from country to country. So it's very important. And as Harish said, I think from his presentation, if I take two words, service and relationship. I will set two examples exactly about these two things about service and relationship. Like one of our experience in our retail stores, I had seen some of the consumers other way around. Like we say that we trained our staff to know our customers by name. And that's how you connect with a relationship with our customers. But one of the experience which I saw that even the consumers have been so friendly to our staff that they are connecting the retail store manager by the name. And if he's not there, then I observed that they say, okay, I'll come later. So that's the comfort level of that relationship which has been trained to the staff is very important in relationship basis, I would say. And yes, he rightly said, we are into service. Retailers should never forget, it's a service product and we are into service. And when it comes to service, I feel to connect with the consumer, it's very important that when a consumer comes inside, it's very important that he should feel that it's for me. He should not get lost. Even in our organization, we say that one word, that even the smell into the retail store should be consumer friendly. That when a consumer comes inside, he should smell in such a way that he feels that here I am connected with and it's for me. So that's what we try to do with our experience into the retail trade. Some of the examples, there are many examples, but I think I'll take to give it.
Harish,
Yeah, when you're talking about inners, I mean, inners is a very polite way of saying undergarments.
And comfort is a very important factor.
And it's a very important factor. We've just emerged from a piece of research exercise in your category. The only reason I'm going to speak about this is to emphasize and re-emphasize to the retail CEO that insight is very, very important. Insight is it. There's nothing more important than insight. And what's really happening is insight, there's something called lowest common denominator insight, which everyone possesses. And it's generic to the category. It is something that's been dug into for donkey's years by every player in that particular terrain. So take undergarments, for instance, as a category. Every undergarment player knows what's important. Comfort is number one. 2 is the sizings, 3 is the kind of variants that they are able to offer, and longevity. In India, longevity is very, very important. So I'll give you an example of a research exercise we have come out of. We've done 16,000 houses across 23 cities, and we've walked into houses trying to find out how people buy their undergarments and why they buy it from a retail store. Now, there's very interesting data. When you go and ask a person a question, he says that, how many undergarments do you have? He says 8. And actually, the reality is, it's not 8. It's a very small number. So we went around when we found to our shock that a middle-class Indian house, a man has 8 undergarments and a woman has 12. Now, then we did a reverse of it. We did a wardrobe study. We went and knocked on the house, actually walked into the house and said, give us permission to see your wardrobe. Then we took out every piece of undergarment, audited it, used the auditor's skill, found out the age of the undergarment, found out the undergarment which is rolled up in a small, tight lid and kept in a corner and not used because it's considered an unlucky undergarment. If I ask you that question, how many of you have an unlucky garment in your house which you don't ever wear, but it's still there? Put up your hands. Come on, yeah. Well, okay. How many of you have slippers which when you wear, it starts raining? Anybody? Yeah. No. Okay, Manvi raised her hand just now. Okay. All I'm saying is we are superstitious. We have a lot of these things. We have audited and found out number of holes in a man's underwear. A standard number, if a person has 3 underwears, he's got 1 underwear with holes on it. If I ask you that question right now, believe it or not, if you shut your eyes, place your hand on your heart, you will answer. How many of you have holes in your undergarments today? Put up your hands. Okay, only one of them. 1 honest soul, 10 dishonest souls.
One brave soul.
Hey, not you. Okay, the reason I stated this is simply this. There's something called lowest common denominator insight, which every Tom, Dick and Harish has. That is not important for the CEO. You have to climb the hierarchy of insight. From lowest common denominator insight, you need to climb to middle common denominator insight, to the highest common denominator insight. That highest common denominator insight is cutting edge, which gives you that edge to market your brand in a differentiated manner in a retail format. So, I think it's time for us to forget the lowest common insights that we were taught by our bosses. It's important for us as new CEOs to contribute back to the business, and on the insight basis, we have to get more and more granular. So don't be satisfied with the insight that is thrown at you by consulting organizations who say they think they know everything, or by advertising agencies who think most of the time that they know the whole world. Okay? Do it yourself, and when you do it yourself, you get highest common denominator insight. So I think in retail, for a CEO, insight is very important.
Prakash, just elaborate on that. Give us an example of an insight which falls in the category of what Harish is calling a highest common denominator insight, not a lowest common denominator. And what visible, tangible impact has it had on a business decision?
It works in very funny ways, and it can work in all kinds of ways. Sometimes in a way that you really can't figure out. And the example that I would give you is from, let me think, I'm thinking of several examples, but this example is from the Middle East, where I was working a few years back. And this was a category which I was then working with a shaving brand, with the Gillette brand, and certainly there, everybody said that in the Arabian countries, you can't sell shaving brands because nobody shaves, everybody grows a beard. And we actually went into studying that in great detail, actually immersing ourselves with consumers, understanding how they use it. We found 2 particular insights. And this happened just by spending a lot of time with consumers, both at the retail store as well as in their homes. One was indeed that they use a lot of blades, which they use for shaping their goatees, and then they throw it away. And the other was that they use it a lot for body shaving. And this surprises enormously because we hadn't seen that anywhere else in the world, this extent of body shaving. And that had a religious connotation as well. So once we started working on that level, that insight, and creating a brand which responded better to that, the wants of that particular need, we found that we were able to get some very significant growth going and a much better franchise towards our brand. Now that's at the product format. At the retail level, I think its insights are very spontaneous. You know, what is an insight? I think the best definition that I have heard of an insight is that it's informed intuition. So it's informed, so there's a lot of big data, there's a lot of database, etc. But to me, it's also very intuitive. It's something that you sense and see what's going on. So I think once you look at a lot of data and then you try and apply your intuition to it, that's when you get real insights into picking that particular thought which is applicable to that particular retail format and getting it going. And the last one I'd say is a lot of our insights are actually with our staff. Our people have great insights. And the moment when we talk to in more retail, we start getting our people together and saying, what do you think about our customers? What are they thinking? How can we make them more happy? We get the best insights from them because they do it all the time.
And, you know, it also deals with the contradiction that Harish referred to, which is, you know, small is beautiful. And how do large organizations like yours get to have like a small is beautiful advantage? And I guess the only route is via your people.
Exactly. You have to invert the pyramid. You make them the CEO of the customer. You make your people who are on the front line the CEO of the customer. They will take care of the customer. You be at the bottom of the pyramid. And then I think you will find that you will get tremendous results. We are so hopeless at this. You know, our people, we have issues in all our stores, just like every retailer does. The churn, as we call it, is 3% a month, 6% a month, 10% a month. Every month on the 7th when you pay, then on the 8th, 9th, 10th, so many people are not landing up at the store, especially when you've got large format retails. This is one of the biggest issues that we face, right? The problem is that we are not getting the fact across that we don't know who they are, we don't know why they are there, we don't know how to make them happy. The moment we start doing that, we find that and we start empowering them with data. So we give them the data to use. We give them the opportunities to use that data, the flexibility to use that data. And all this is, is heresy in much of the language of retail, which is a very controlled environment. You'll start finding your customers much happier. You'll start seeing improvements in your sales growth, in your same store sales growth, and all the other indices that we want to see.
Sumanta, sustainability, and how does that fit in with what we're discussing today? Retail insights that every CEO wants to know. The Coca-Cola experience.
Sure. Sustainability is often seen as CSR. But all of us gathered here as CEOs want to ensure one thing, sustainability of our business. Is it truly sustainable? And to do that, we have to be ahead of our times. And it's not just about today, 2020, but 100 years from now, is that business going to be sustainable? The only way it is going to be sustainable is that whether the communities around us are sustainable. And communities is just not just people, it's the retailers, it's every social aspect and group that comes together to form a community. And therefore, corporates have to take that into consideration to make sure that all our actions are sustainable. So, for example, I would say that it's not just about ignoring what's happening today. So if there is a PET bottle which gets wasted, as in just I drink the water, throw away the bottle, does that add to my sustainability? No, it isn't. Is that my problem? Yes and no, because I'm not the entire PET industry. There is a lot of people. But is it my responsibility? Absolutely. To not only bring together my company, but the industry and society at large to really address sustainability issues so that at the long term, the business can prosper. And it's critical that you take on. So for us at Coca-Cola, we understand that water, PET recycling, and more importantly, in India specifically, it's about making tomorrow's consumers, our children who are going to build tomorrow's communities, are they getting the right form of education and exposure? So we have a role to play in it. And it's not philanthropy. It is more to ensure that we as a business remain sustainable. And for that, you have to partner. You can't do it on your own. You've got to partner with industry, you've got to partner with society, you've got to partner with government, and it's a slow build. So for a CEO, sustainability for the business is critical to think about it now as we shape how India is going to be 20, 50 years from now.
You know, Mr. Shiv Shankar, would you sort of agree with that? Or is that, you know, does it sound a tough one to implement? Sustainability and how much of mind space, your mind space, it occupies right now?
Sustainability even in coffee. Sorry. That's something which I know.
and that's what we're banking on.
Talk about,
yeah,
you know.
talk about coffee.
So sustainability is very, very strong around the world, and even in coffee, where there's a lot of effort going on fair trade, there's a lot of effort going on conservation, etc. So some of those concepts have come into India, and some of those concepts that we will also be bringing in the future. Our company, just like Coca-Cola, has a sustainability campaign around the world. Most large players in, who have any dealings with agricultural crops have a very strong sustainability program. So clearly, and even in our coffee shops, we have started to evaluate the whole concept of environment, sustainability. The factory that we're setting up now is very, very environment friendly, LEED certification. So it is the future, and it's a reality, is all I can say.
And it has a business impact as well.
Absolutely.
On sustainability, I do believe, I really agree with what you have said and both of you have mentioned. I think, if you really look at it, there are good sustainable stories from across the world which tell us that sustainability can actually be profit-making as well. So if for Coke, water, in fact, why for Coke? For each one of our businesses and each of your businesses, including the undergarments business and including, the garments business of every kind, water is the lowest common and the highest common denominator. Because water, we are going to be water short. But if you look at the sustainability story, I remember walking into a store, a retail outfit, and picking up a packet of 80 grams of coffee. And it said it is something called songbird-friendly coffee. I'm relating it because of what you had to say, Shiv. Songbird-friendly coffee. And then I picked another packet called Maxwell House Coffee. Maxwell House Coffee costed $1.20, and this costed $6.40. Same pack size. When I looked at the back of the pack of Songbird-friendly coffee, it had a story. It said, this coffee grows in Malawi. It's grown by a small planter called Hussein Musavi. Hussein Musavi lives on the plantation. He does not employ labor. He plucks the coffee himself. And his coffee grows in coffee bushes, which grow under tall sal trees. And all these tall sal trees live songbirds. And this coffee grows under the melodious music of songbirds. And Hussein Musavi has not chopped the trees, because if he chopped the trees, he would get more output from the estate, but he is very eco-friendly, he's tree-friendly, he's songbird-friendly, and because this coffee grows under the melodious songs of songbirds, pay $6.40 for this coffee. And guess what? I actually picked it up, okay? I wouldn't do it regularly, let me be honest with you. I'm not an American. Ouch! I wouldn't do it regularly. But the American market is one which is open to the politically correct story. And guess what? In India, in the bigger cities, I noticed this particularly in modern retail and the peak of modern retail, top-end modern retail. Luxury modern retail does not exist in India, but at least at the top end of modern retail, people are getting very conscious as to what are the practices that went into putting this brand together. And I'm not talking child labor, and I'm not talking stuff like that. I'm really talking of positive practices, positive carbon footprints that you leave behind. When you walk into a Lavazza, are they serving coffee in a plastic cup? Ouch, I don't want it. Are they serving it in a paper cup? Ouch, again, I don't want it, because paper has a coating under it. But then, are they serving it in ceramic mugs, which can get washed and recycled again and again? Then I'm with it. So everybody has to reinvent our business practices. In our retail outfits, are we using plastic, even if it's biodegradable plastic? What's happening? How are we segregating our waste? I think all these are stories But believe it or not, give us another 6 to 8 years, Indian retail is going to grow up on this format. And I think each one of us is going to talk the positive story of being totally, totally positive on it. So I think when we started, Sumanto, you said CSR. I think, in the old days, CSR became a bad word. It wasn't a 4-letter word, it was a 3-letter word, but a 3-letter word that sounded like a 4-letter word. But the point is, totally detached from business, and it was very selfish. In the old days, CSR was a selfish motive thing. Actually, back again, CSR today is selfish motive, but it's selfish motive with the good of everybody concerned in mind. I mean, I was, the other day, a couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody at Coke, and that gentleman was telling me about what they're doing in Africa with water. And if you really look at it, I think, it's a very long term. Is it a selfish move? Yes, it is a selfish move for Coca-Cola, because you have to be water positive. And at the end of the day, you're creating your market. At the same time, in this selfish motive, there is a very big unselfish motive. So I think CSR and anything that is represented by it is a very, very positive thing that all of retail has to embrace.
I couldn't resist sharing my insight. As a consumer, I refuse to go to a mall which doesn't have adequate parking and doesn't enforce non-clogging of the road, because it's one of the most typical sites in Delhi. The security screening is done on the main road. There are some malls which give up their own space and do the security checking inside. It's something as basic as that which determines whether or not I visit a mall. But enough about me. Just to get this conversation moving to a slightly different level, I'm going to encourage all of you in the audience who have questions to raise your hands, briefly introduce yourselves, direct a question to a specific panelist if you can, and let's get this more widely participated. Here.
My question is to Mr. Harish. See, I'm a retailer, retailing of children's apparel. I'm in the process of branding my product. I started identifying, that product branding. I've done already this clarified, defined this vision, values, and all the characteristics, archetype, DNA, and made the model also. Now I just want to know that, as you said, it is related to service branding. Shall I skip this product branding and directly jumping to the service branding? Is it like that?
Yes. I think if you're in the kids garment business, you are in in retail, you are certainly in service branding. I think every one of us is in service branding. There's nothing but a service. Even God, when we worship at home, God is a product. When I go to a church to worship God, it's called a service. By the way, I go to a temple, I go there, also it's a service. So if you really look at it as a kids brand, you certainly have a service dimension. And how can you be different? Very many ways. But I'll give you just one idea possibly. The thought of saying, kids brands, kids are treated badly in this country. When they go into a retail outfit, the entire retail store actually caters to the parents of the kids who come with them, because they're the ones with the wallets. Now, can you turtle that entire thing, and can you realize and cater to the kid? Because even when we do a poster, all posters are eye-level posters. But a kid is exactly about 2.5 feet. A kid's eye view of the world is like this. You look up like this. So what if you designed your store with a kid's eye view? And I think that can be very different. So it's only small bits of innovation, small bits of stuff. And how would you find out that this is the eye view of the kid? All of us know it, but we don't want to articulate it. You find it out through research. So I keep saying every step you take, every breath you take, research your way, market research your way. You'll come out with brilliant stuff yourself. You don't need anybody else's help.
But service is, more intangible. What is the tangible level we have to brand it?
You see, service is an intangible for a while, but not all the time. Actually, service is a big tangible. There's a Bata store in Indore. Okay, Bata is a brand. One store on one side of the road. Right opposite it, there's another franchisee opposite the road. On the left-hand side, people drive on the left-hand side, come back on the right-hand side. The one store, same square feet, Bata is Bata. Bata prices are Bata prices. Service is service. But there's one guy, one franchisee has a daily turnover of 1,16,000 rupees, whereas the guy opposite him, right opposite him, does a turnover of 8,500 rupees every day. Why? The reason is simple. The service that you get the differentiated service that the guy is giving in one of the locations is better than this. So when your brand is common, it's only the service that is a differentiator. So invest in service, invest deeply into it and passionately into it.
This is Kanishk. I represent a company that deals into data management, business analytics, and BI into CPG domain. So I think this is the best forum where I can just put forward my questions. As Harish started with big data story, like in the West, I have seen that there's a lot of collaborations going between the retailers, the wholesalers, and the manufacturers of the sharing of the data. Okay, for getting the critical insights, getting the demand signal repository, is getting the key insight what the store is selling. My first question comes in, is Indian manufacturers are gain that level of, attain a platform of sharing these kind of a data with their partners? And the second is about the investments. Like we deal with a lot of big CPG companies, okay, even cigarette manufacturers, chocolate manufacturers, and they have the best of the systems of the ERP, SAP, Oracle, but still they give us work, okay, defining some projects. So is the Indian manufacturers have the roadmap of doing something with the data, investing into this particular domain?
Okay, so let me try and paraphrase your two questions. One is collaboration on data. And do you? I'm going to ask each one of you that question. I mean, is there a collaboration on insights, or similar insights that you all might be getting?
Yeah, certainly. I think collaboration has to happen. It can happen at several levels. So let me mention two. One is, for example, between the retailer and the manufacturer. And it obviously makes sense for us to share our information. In our more retail stores, for example, data on brand offtake, what our consumers think about our brands, whatever research we have, whatever feedback we have, we play it back to the manufacturers who service us, because we hope they will be able to design better products for our consumers. Ultimately, every store grows when the consumers buy more from those stores, which means it's always a partnership between everybody involved. The second is partnerships between organizations that are serving the same consumer. So, for example, Harish talked about telecom companies. If they could share all their data together, wouldn't that be great? You can have also across categories. So, for example, if you have people who, let's say, are telecom, between a telecom brand, a retail brand, an insurance brand. So, let's say at the Aditya Birla Group level, we look at saying, how can we share this data, but in a way that doesn't bug consumers, that is not invading their privacy, but really, with their permission, helps to serve them better and try and give them what they want. And this is really where the future of using data information to help deliver better insights will really go to.
Your thoughts as well on that. I mean, you know, just in terms of Rishi, data sharing, insights, have you ever collaborated? Just some specific examples that will help answer this gentleman's question.
See, what you get to see is that a lot of data is collected by brand people, and the more they integrate with the vendors, it allows them to, improve the efficiency of the whole. So we have vendor managed inventory, for example, our core items, where data is passed on to our vendors and they produce based on the rate of sales in your retail. Also, there is a trend where people have monetized data. So large retailers or airline companies who collect a lot of data, they're ready to share, but it's also a business model where they would like to, monetize that and allow people to use it. So,
well, again, as a customer, I join a gym and I start getting thousands of SMSs for weight loss products. So I guess there is some data integration and sharing that's going on out there. I mean, yeah, it's certainly happening. Any more questions? We've got about 5 or 10 minutes, so let's have one right here.
This is Rakesh. I represent a company called Trisa Retail. We are into jewelry retailing. There's a question for Harish. You started off with mentioning about the power shift which is happening from a brand owner to a retailer. So would you be able to advise what kind of steps that a brand owner could take to circumvent the power shift?
To supplement or thwart? Circumvent, to thwart it?
Yeah.
Okay. My record to most brand owners is the horse has already bolted. Look around at other countries, you'll see that the horse is gone. And there's been a shift of power. However, the shift of power in India is going to be much more gradual than it's been in the United States of America. The United States of America has a total of 8,064 retail outlets. Of course, I count Walmart as one in the United States. And the rest are, everyone else. So if you look at it, in most countries which have small number of retail outlets, the horse is already bolted completely. You can't do anything. So key account management is the resource of the company, where the company manages supermarkets, because the supermarkets are the front face of the brand. And they fight with them to ensure that, hope you don't manufacture a private label and go with it. You know what I mean? So the entire model is changing. Take a look at what Walmart has said in India already. Walmart has clearly said in India that they're going to have something like about 22% plus of their offering to be private labels. So which means that if you walk into a Walmart, you might find a cola brand, which is a cola with a Walmart cola, and that could be bottled by a Pepsi Cola, let's say. I've spoken too much of Coke, so I won't use it's bottled by Pepsi. So when all this, the only way you can thwart them is, you have to join hands with the retailer. In India, it's going to be tougher because we have 14.6 million retail outlets. So big companies, when it comes to big cities, you are going to hand over on a platter the shift of power. Not too fast, because 6.4% is the kind of share for most categories in modern retail. In the smaller towns, so big companies, the brand power needs to be increased in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and the rural villages. So big companies will be pushed to use their brand power in the smaller towns, and in the bigger cities, you're handing it over to someone. So from a very socialistic point of view, I think this is a great trend. The big company at last will penetrate the nook and corner of this country.
I have to get Shumanto's comments on this as well. I mean, because the power shift, and you're dealing with lots of small disaggregated retailers. Your thoughts?
I'd like to take off from where Harish left. Don't try and circumvent it. I think it's very clear partnership and collaboration is the only way forward. Not just with big retail, even with small retail. Retailers per se are worried about turnover, increasing the value turnover. Prakash talked about selling more from their stores. So how is a company or a partner, the partner actually who wins is going to be the one who is able to create more value, more turnover for the retailer, for the category that they play in. And you have to be, as a true partner, you have to be honest to building the category. So it's not about circumventing, definitely. It's about more partnership and being open to partnership.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ketan Vyas. I represent a brand called Voli, which is a German shoe care brand being retailed in India. I had a small company. We are a 100 people plus company. Mainly, our people comprise of in-store promoters who are selling at the stores. We get a lot of brand information from the brands where we retail, back-end information of the day of sales, what is the quantity, etc. My question to you, sir, is, Mr. Harish, when you get data, when you collate it, when your staff collates it, you get a lot of data which you like to see. Your sales are rising, your profits are rising. At the same time, you're seeing data which you don't like. There are stores which are not performing. There are counters which are not performing. There are tier 2 cities which are not performing. There is a tier 1 city performing, a metro not performing. As a CEO, what is the decision one should take when one sees data that he does not like, or it is not in line with his expectations of business? In just one more point, should he first look inside his company to say, how is this happening when it is not happening everywhere else? Or should he look outside his company to the retailer or to the wholesaler or the distributor and say, if it is not happening everywhere else in your city, what is wrong with your system? What is the decision he should start taking when there is a data which he does not like to see?
Sir, you are certainly a CEO who is very hands-on with data. That comes through. I have a very long answer for this, but I can't give that long answer. I'll give you a short answer. I would advise you to look at data which is outside in more. Give a lot more weightage for outside in data than inside out data. Because half the time, we tend to get too very involved with what we think. We stew with our own ideas. There is the jury of executive opinion within my own company. I have 6 executives. What they say is God's truth. Don't go by that. Look at the outside-in data. I'm going to shorten this entire answer by just one thing. I have just written a paper on this subject of outside-in data. Are you on Twitter, sir? Yeah? So you could just look up my Twitter link, Harish Bijur, @HarishBijur, and pick up that article. It'll answer your question, hopefully, in a 360-degree format.
But if I may just take a few seconds, my question was a little different. I have data coming from outside. I have collated it. It's presented to me. And when I'm looking at it, I'm happy on certain accounts, but I'm very dissatisfied on a certain account. It's like the Bata example you gave. When one store is working, the other guy is not working. My question is, should I call my sales executive and ask him, what's the problem? Or should I go to the retailer and say, what's the problem?
Sir, my answer is you should not call your sales executive and ask him because he'll only justify. You should not go to the retailer and ask him because he'll also justify. You should go to the customer and the consumer who walks in and ask him. Not even ask him. Maybe you should just observe. You know, the power of observational research is higher by a factor of 6.3 than the power of asking a question. I mean, I come up to you and ask you a question. Sir, how old are you?
42.
Sir, you don't have to answer that. Most people answer that question dishonestly. Okay? Depending who's asking the question, if a pretty young girl asks me that question, I'm all of 48. I might say I'm 45, and try and get away with it if it's a pretty girl. So most people, when you ask questions, they tell you the wrong thing. Observational, retail, if it's retail you're talking about, just go to your shop, unobtrusively watch, and you'll get all your answers. Because the moment you are obtrusive, I think you get pre-dedicated answers. You get to hear what you like to hear. And I would love it if you listen to things which you don't like to hear. And never ask your people, because people, unfortunately, reach their level of incompetence in retail, in sales, in marketing, in business rather fast. We can never, the consumer is moving much faster than any of us in our own companies.
Our time is up as well, but before we wind up and thank the panel, this is 7 Minutes to Glory, which is presented by Mohini Bainpal, Head Retail, Sara Sole.
Before I start with my presentation, I'm going to start with something that's going to definitely excite all the men in the house here. And here it is.
This is an ad for the finest shoes you'll ever own. Inspired by the finesse of Italian designs, each pair is fussed over by more than 250 craftsmen. Now, we ladies would just love to own such a pair, but sadly they make shoes only for men, who probably can't wait for the movie to start.
As you know by now that I am in the business of making and selling shoes, but before I start with my own brand, I'd like to share with you some reasons why we're really excited to be in this space. The men's footwear category, the organized men's footwear category, is close to 20,000 crores in India, and it is dominated 60% by the men's category. I'm so sorry. The total footwear category is about 20,000 crores in India, and it's dominated 60% by the men's category. What is even more exciting is that 16% is the growth of the premium men's category, which is more than double the growth of the overall total category. And the most important and interesting statistic of all, that in the last 10 years, we've seen per capita consumption of footwear go up from 0.5 to 2. So all this brings us to a real reason of why me and my team is here today. Roosh. What is Roosh? Roosh is a premium men's footwear, shoe, accessories, and small leather goods store, and we embody the spirit of celebrating style. I'll take a very quick diversion here and mention that we are not about fashion. We are not about the ever-changing trends of fashion which change every 3 months, but we are about timeless elegance that is forever in style. What does Roosh mean? Roosh is actually a Sanskrit word, and Roosh is passion in Sanskrit. And at Roosh, we are passionate about design, comfort, and craftsmanship. For those of you who haven't seen our store in Bangalore, this is a picture of a store. And if you notice the picture very, very carefully, you'll notice that we design, display, and sell shoes in categories. Which brings us to a very important differentiator in the category. We did a research 2 years back in Bombay and in Delhi, and we found out that men buy around occasions. And what better way to sell and to offer shoes to men than around occasions? What is the biggest occasion that men buy around? Men buy around work. So at work, we actually have at Roosh 3 specific personality types. So you have something called Roosh Classic, which takes from the year-old traditional sense of cap toes, brogues, wingtips, typically meant for senior management. Then you have Roosh Semi-Formal, something that you can wear to work and also carry with you post-work. And for Mr. Conservative, there are minimalistic styles that are subtle yet very, very smart. We have 4 other categories from where you can buy shoes at Roosh. Occasion, so you have the special dinner with the girlfriend, or it's the boss's farewell party, or it's your best friend's engagement party. You may want to wear a 2-tone burnished shoe with perhaps ornamentation, perhaps not. But whatever you like, you will find at Roosh Occasion. Roosh Club, something that men and women are definitely going to ask you about. Wedding, whether your wedding wear is Indian or your wedding wear is not Indian, it is Western, you're definitely as a groom bound to find something in our store. And finally, for the times that you want to relax, there are boat shoes, there are driving shoes, there are hiking shoes, and there are ankle-length boots that we have under Roosh Casual. So we take pride in not just selling shoes around occasion, we take pride in also how we sell our shoes. And how we sell our shoes is by ensuring that our staff is trained for over 3 weeks from the best technical and hospitality experts in the country. We've actually tied up with the Footwear Design and Development Institute in Noida, and they come down and they train our staff on the technical attributes of shoemaking. And we have a hospitality expert from Bombay who comes down every time we have a training session, and they train our staff on customer experience. Another thing that we are extremely passionate about, some of you who are in footwear retail, you'll realize that the most important real estate in footwear is actually the walls in a store. It's not the carpet area in a store, it's the walls on the store. So what we've done is that we've taken 5 to 8 feet of wall in every store of ours and converted it into almost a museum-like space where we showcase the arduous and the passionate task of making shoes, something that has been forgotten. I'll have you know that there are close to 252 steps that can be taken to make a shoe, and we've tried to combine them and compress them into 9 stages so anyone who comes into the store can understand the labor of love that we have for making shoes. Very quickly about our parent company. Our parent company is Saraswole, and we've been in business for the last 11 years, and we supply to around 100 global brands across the world. We also have a tie-up with a design studio in Italy. Therefore, you will not be at loss with style because we ensure that a design studio in Italy is keeping us up to date with everything that is in style. All right. So having said all of this, why should the Indian consumer really buy us? There are 3 reasons why the Indian consumer should really buy us. The first being comfort. Men buy shoes for comfort. It's a well-established fact. We have 6 attributes of comfort. I'm sure all of you can read those attributes of comfort out there. I'm not going to read it out for you. But we've made sure that whichever shoe you buy, there is comfort inbuilt into those shoes. Let's not forget the lifestyle elements, design and craftsmanship. Whether it's a hand-stitched moccasin that gives you comfort, or whether there is rare leather like deer leather, fish leather, Parma leather, all of it which is designed to enhance the way you look, the way you feel, and the way you appear. After all of this, you may ask me, can I really afford the shoes that Roosh makes? And I would say absolutely. The price range that we have starts from 2,490 and goes up to 14,990, making us a perfect criteria to be considered in the premium range. We did a campaign in Bangalore recently. For some of you who are not in Bangalore and may not have seen a campaign, a quick reflection of the work we did. Pity we don't make shoes for women. I'm one of them and I regret it. That's some of our print campaign. Some of our outdoor work. Okay. Now, all of you may ask, so all this is great. You have another manufacturer and exporter running into retail in India, which is such a difficult nut to crack. Are we really going to make it or not? So we said, let's share something with you, and you're more than welcome to give me your feedback and what you think. Our average ticket size is close to 4,000 rupees, which we consider as very positive. Our average conversion ratio in the last 2 months when we've been doing our campaign is close to 48%. We know this can go up to 60%, but we're trying to get there. Our average unit per transaction is close to 2, which we think is very positive. Like I mentioned, we also sell shoe accessories and small leather goods. Repeat rate. I think from my previous organization, the one thing I've learned is it's important to retain your existing customer. And we have 15% of our existing customers coming back to us month on month and buying from us, which we consider as a very positive leading indicator. Customer referral, word of mouth at 15%. And one of the most important things, we don't make shoes for 18-year-olds or 22-year-olds. We make shoes from 24 to 35-year-olds, and they are close to 48% of our entire customer base. So what can Roosh do for somebody who we work with? Reinforce international imagery, drive footfalls, drive repeat sales, therefore drive business. Where we are currently in Bangalore, opening soon in Chennai and in Bombay. And next year, we're looking to expand to Delhi, Hyderabad, NCR, and Chandigarh. I'll end with something that we use in cine advertising in Bangalore. I hope you find it interesting, and I'd love to hear your comments about it later.
Ladies in the audience, we request you to cover your eyes. No, seriously, we mean it. You're not going to like what you see next. We do make the finest shoes, but only for men, who are probably out buying popcorn.
Thank you very much. That was Mohini. My brand is called Roosh, and I'm happy to meet anyone at all, and my team is here, and we'll be happy to speak with you. Thank you.
Well, I am going to take this opportunity to thank this panel. I should have done it earlier, but thank you all very much. And I hope the audience enjoyed the session.